Hey, how's it going? My name's Dakota. So quick little background on why I'm relevant and why I can answer these questions. So obviously I drift. I have a 88 miles an hour X7. I also work at Deatschwerks. I'm one of the product technical specialists. And so if anyone calls in, asks questions, I'm the guy that they talk to. So I've got about 15 questions. I may come up with a few along the way, but so basically I just want to kind of do a quick overview of what's necessary and unnecessary for a fuel system. I see a lot of people asking questions and not having an idea of what to get or what not to get, or you know, what size injectors do I need, what pump do I need, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and just dive right into it. I'm going to start at basically the back of the car and just work the way forward. So the main topic is going to be pumps, tanks, filters, injectors, regulators, and fuel lines. So that should pretty much cover a majority of the bases and get most of your questions out of the way. If you have any more, leave them down in the comments or on Facebook or whichever. Doesn't bother me. So we'll start with pumps. What size pump should I get? So that just depends on your build. If you have a stock 350Z, you probably don't need a pump. If you have a SR20, 240, probably worth it to get like a DW200 or a 255 or something around there, and that support you up to 450 to 500 wheel. Maybe less, maybe more, just depending on the tuner and other circumstances. You got an LS car, you're trying to make like 600, 700, maybe like a 300, maybe even a 400 if you're trying to make around 8. I'm basing all these numbers on a return system, not returnless, because if you're running something like that, most likely you're already going to return. Returnless is kind of a different animal, and if you can get away from it, I would say it's probably for the better, just because it has its own hurdles that having a return system doesn't. It's just kind of a quick guideline. So next question, do I need an inline pump to support big horsepower? No. So that's kind of answered by the last question. There's a lot of pumps out there nowadays that make plenty of flow, and so having an inline pump, it's really only convenient if you have a fuel cell, or maybe your surge tank's more compatible with that. Do I need a high volume, low pressure pump to feed the surge tank? No. Every pump is more volume at lower pressure. That's just how it works. The higher the pressure, the more the pump has to work against the pressure to make to make flow. So a pump at theoretical 0 pressure, there's always going to be pressure on the line. I mean, whether it be 1, 2, 3 psi, but it's going to deliver more flow at lower pressure. So if you're feeding a surge tank, or the fuel system, or whatever you're feeding, the more the pump is regulated or raised in pressure is going to lower the flow of the pump. So if you run a pump at 40 psi, it's going to run more flow at that than it would at 80 psi. That's just natural. That's how the pump works. So a high pressure, low volume, or a high volume, low pressure pump isn't necessary for like something if you have a surge tank, if you're trying to feed that. If the surge tank is plumbed right, you're not going to need issues. Now it will change depending on your surge tank needs. If you're running 3 pumps out of a surge tank, you're going to need a larger pump, and just a larger pump will provide more flow, just the same way like a 255 would probably flow around 300 liters per hour at 0. A 400 is going to flow like probably 450 at 0. It's kind of proportional to the pump. Next question, why are inline pumps so loud? It's mostly due to the mechanism that drives them. They have a metal rotor in them, and then they almost look like ball bearings, but they're cylindrical, and them sliding back and forth, as well as them being spun around by the rotor, makes the noise. Do I need a check valve for an inline pump? If you're running a stage system, so if you have one pump that's on all the time and then another pump that comes on a later time, you will need a check valve. Otherwise the pump will back feed through the other pump, and you'll lose pressure in the fuel system. The only other benefit would be if you had a check valve on the pump, would be if you turn the pump off or turn the car off, in theory the pump or all the lines and the rail should stay pressurized, so that way whenever you go to start it again, it should start right up, or there should already be pressure and fuel in the line instead of bleeding back through the system and through the pump. So we'll move up on to our next topic, surge tank and fuel cells. All right, when do I need a fuel cell? So if you're building like a full-on race car and you don't need a surge tank, or you're not running a factory tank or anything like that, your tube in the rear, you can run a fuel cell, be just fine. If you're running like a stock G35, stock 350Z, almost stock anything, I wouldn't waste your time or money. The stock fuel cell should be in a decent location, and there should be enough crash zones for if anything happens that you should be safe. And I mean, if you're competing at such a level that the speeds are high enough that you need bash bars and other bars surrounding the tank and stuff like that, then you're already out. You should already have a fuel cell in there. Next question: when do I need a surge tank? So this is kind of a interesting question, as it really depends on your car. I know that S13s, R32s, FCs, FDs, most of your 90s cars have pretty poor baffling in the fuel tank. Some are better than others, but I would say anything that doesn't come with a fuel bucket, and this is kind of a weird gray area, because it's really easy to fit an aftermarket pump into like a S13 FC, anything like that. It's just a pump on a stick, as opposed to a fuel bucket. Usually they're kind of limited on space, but the bucket itself actually acts as like a surge tank, so the pump stays submerged. So I would say anything pre like plastic buckets, so I'd say pre 2000 really. Majority that's not going to have a plastic bucket. Even some of the like 2000s cars aren't going to have a bucket. It's going to but it's going to be real susceptible to fuel slosh. I would say those cars you would need to keep above half a tank to keep them fully submerged and make sure the car is getting fuel and doesn't, if it's decently modified, you may lean spike it, or if it's boosted, you may lean spike it and end up blowing the motor or something like that, losing a cylinder, and it could be something detrimental. So a surge tank is really helpful for that, so that way you have pumps that are constantly submerged and you're not out of fuel until you're completely out of fuel, and hopefully you'll get to it before that and not be like me where you blow a motor because you're having too much fun and not paying attention to the fuel level. Next question is, how do I plumb a surge tank? So you have an S13, you bought a surge tank, and you're trying to fix the problems with the fuel slosh, or you have an FC and you're trying to fix problems with the fuel slosh. I happen to have my old surge tank that was in my car, and generally, let's see if we can get this in focus, or decently in focus. So this is a Deatschwerks, the 2.5 liter surge tank, and the pumps sit in here, so the outlet's actually on top of the pump, and it comes right out. So you will have your in from the tank, you will have your return from your regulator, and you'll have your return back to the tank. So in theory, once this tank is completely full, it'll fill back into the tank, and there should be no pressure in here. So if you have pressure in here, you have a restriction, or you have another issue, someone aligns, or something's not working properly to get the fuel out of this. So this should never be full, or never not be full, and also never not be empty unless you're running out of fuel. But this is a really good investment for someone who's running an older car and is concerned about their motor and making sure that it's going to survive in situations where you're long left-handers or long right-handers, depending on where the pump is in the tank. If it's on the left, right-handers are your enemy. If it's on your right, the left-handers are your enemy, because the fuel's all getting the opposite side of the tank from it. So next section, filters. What micron filter should I use? So most tuners kind of have their own opinions. Our general rule of thumb is 100 micron before the pump, 10 micron after the pump. 100 microns decent enough to keep most things out of the pump, and you're really only concerned about big things getting in there. I've seen a few that just get really bad, and eventually it's just so dirty that the pump can't pull through it, and that can cause issues for the pump by, you know, being really high amp, or end up clogging up the motor, something like that. So it's always worth it. I would say it probably, if you have replaceable pump or filters, if you have replaceable washable filters, I would say probably wash those every 6 months if you're on regular gas. If you're on E, I would say probably every 3 months, or at least inspect them, because the E85 tends to pick up a lot of things. It's just one of its natural things that it does, and it usually makes things dirty. Your tank will be completely clean because it'll clean all that stuff up, but it'll put it in all your filters and your pumps and your injectors and all that. I would definitely run probably like a stainless mesh filter if you're on E85. Your regular cardboard or paper filter is fine with gas. Is a bigger filter better? Yes. There's more surface area that can be filtered. There's more surface area for the fuel to go through. There is less pressure loss going through a filter. Yeah, it's just overall better. So the bigger filter you can get, the better. I understand there's packaging concerns, and that's the reason why there's different size filters. But if you can run a big filter, run a big filter. It's not going to hurt anything. Next section, injectors. What size injectors do I need? Depends on your build. Just keep in mind that some certain motors need more fuel than others. Rotaries need more fuel than others. Subarus typically need more fuel than others. For the most part, I think DSMs run a little richer too, or need a little more fuel. But it really depends on your build and how much power you're trying to make. The general rule of thumb I use, and this isn't necessarily applicable to all builds, but I would say it's roughly 1,000 cc's. So like if you have a V8 and you have a 1,000 cc injector, you can make 1,000 horsepower on E85. This is specific to E85, and you get a little more leeway with gas because it takes less gas to make the same amount of power, but at the same time, since you're using less of it, it's a little leaner. It's more prone to detonation. E85 is less prone to detonation. That's why people use it, and it's a little easier to work with timing and all that. So it just depends on that. So it depends on the fuel, and depends on the motor. So if you want to make 1,000 horsepower out of a V8, 1,000 cc injectors will probably get you there. You can go a little larger. It's not going to hurt anything. Your duty cycle will be less. Not a big deal. Less duty cycle isn't really an issue as it used to be, 10-15 years ago when we had not as good injectors. EV14s are wonderful, and they work through a wide range. I'm running 1,500 cc's in the RX-7, and I don't think I reach over maybe 50% duty cycle, and I'm probably at 20% duty cycle at idle, and the car's perfect. So running a larger injector is not going to hurt anything. It's also, there if you need it, and if you want to up the boost, there you go. You just up the injector duty cycle and you're good to go. Oh, we'll go back to the injectors real quick. So what I was getting at with the V8 thing, kind of do a little math with that, is if you're making 1,000 horsepower on a V8, 1,000 cc injectors on the 4-cylinder, maybe we'll make 500 wheel. The less injectors you have, the larger the cc injector you're going to need to make the same amount of horsepower as 8 of them or more. So it's just common math. And then rotaries, if there's any other rotary guys, 1,000 cc injectors, you can maybe make 400 on, 1,500s, maybe 600. This is on E. And then 2,000 cc injectors, 700-ish. We just need more fuel. That's the way it is. Next question, or next section, is regulators. When do I need an aftermarket regulator? I would say anything you're running at least 100 liter per hour more pump than what the OE one is. So cars that have fuel buckets that have regulators inside of them, get rid of it. If you're trying to make more power than stock, you can get away with it for a little while, but that's a whole nother topic, and I can lean more into that if you guys are curious, but that's a lot of explanation. Anything older than I would say 05 that has a return system with a regulator built in on the rail, I would say it's probably worth it to do if you're running like a 300 liter per hour pump or more. 255, you're probably fine. But it's kind of hit or miss and depends if the regulator keeps up with the pump. Next section, fuel lines. What size fuel line should I run? Depends on how much power you're making. If you're making like stock power to 1,000, -6 is fine. You can honestly get away with it and it's not going to hurt anything. There's no reason to run any bigger unless you want to. You can run a -8, and you'll get up to like 1,500 to 2,000 and not have any issues. -10, no need, unless you're running like methanol or something that needs a lot of flow. And for the most part, I don't think most of us are going to be doing that. What type of fuel line should I use? A majority of the line on the market right now is CPE, which is a synthetic rubber, or PTFE, which is like a plastic, almost like PEX-like Teflon that is pretty much safe for everything. That's kind of the difference. Is if you're running regular pump, 87, 89, 91, 93, any of those, and E85, you'll be fine with CPE. If you're needing anything more than that, methanol, alcohol, oxygenated fuels, race fuels, some of those have some sort of cleaner in them, who knows. I would go PTFE, and then you're safe for everything, no worries. Next question, what braiding should I get? So I know some tracks have issues with nylon. If you go with our line, we are NHRA approved, which basically means you can run a nylon outside the car because it has a stainless braid underneath it. And then also if you're on the stainless, you're obviously fine there too. Both of our line with the stainless in it, so they're both safe for the same amount of pressure, except for CPE and PTFE. CPE is usually rated for like 250 to 350 PSI. PTFE is up to like 1,000, which we shouldn't even reach more than the CPE. So unless you're running it for something else, then I mean that's not fuel system related, so I'm not answering that. But as far as what you should get, it's your preference. If you're going to run anything other than the 85 fuel wise, I would say get the PTFE. So that's all the questions I could think of and that I see most people ask. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask me on the channel right here or on YouTube. If you want to see me do some drifty things, I post all that on our team channel, Team Kūsō, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Bye.